Hey guys, it's Frozenballz here, and welcome to another episode of the Minmaxer's Playground. Today we're going to be talking about Nidus. Before we get into that though, I've got a couple of announcements to make and a couple of things which I need to talk about. First of all, the reason why this video hasn't already been released is because I recently got partnered on Twitch. I applied for partnership a couple of weeks back and I finally got a response on Valentine's Day where they basically accepted my application. So I've been a little bit busy with the whole process of accepting it and, getting everything set up, etc. And I'm still kind of busy with it, but I figured that there's a little bit of downtime between the whole application process so I could actually, work on the video as I wanted to. Having said that, there might be a little bit of a time or a delay between this one and the next video just because I'm going to be very busy over the next couple of weeks for the whole partnership thing and kind of working towards that. Another thing to point out, I was recently invited by Twitch to represent Warframe on the Twitch front page as a community spotlight kind of thing. So on Wednesday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. GMT, I'm going to be streaming on the Twitch front page representing Warframe. It's a massive opportunity and I'm thankful that, Twitch actually let me do it. And, the fact that even Warframe recommended me in the first place as one of the people to represent Warframe. I usually tend to post all these updates on my Discord and on Twitter as well. So if you guys want to be up to date about all this kind of information, make sure you're checking out Twitter, make sure you're checking out Discord. The links will be in description so you can, join Discord, etc. Secondly, I submitted a glyph to Drew. So most likely I'm going to be getting a Warframe glyph very, very soon. The way I'm going to distribute it is going to be the same way how Tactical Potato does his. I'm going to have a bot on my Discord, which you can type a command and you can get a key for the glyph itself. And it's going to be a first come, first serve basis. Whoever wants a glyph, get yourselves on Discord, type the command and get the glyph when it goes live. I will make an announcement on my Discord and Twitter as well when the actual glyph goes live and I actually have the codes available. Right now we don't have the codes available, but if you saw the screenshots on Drew's Twitter, you know that that is in the works and it's very close to being implemented. Now that that's all out of the way, let's talk about Nidus. Now, Nidus came out fairly recently, and despite everything that happened with his quest where people didn't really like it, he's an actually really good frame. Despite not having any shields, he's extremely tanky. He has a very high damage output, and he can bring CC to the table as well. And because he uses a different advanced mechanic utilizing stacks, because of this, Nidus scales pretty well and can be taken into pretty high level missions as a DPS and CC frame at the same time. What this basically means is there are two particularly distinct ways of playing Nidus, and they're completely opposite to each other, but they use the same sort of formula in terms of how they actually function. Having said that, before we get into the builds, let's talk about the actual abilities itself and explain how they actually function. The first thing about Nidus you need to understand is that with the introduction of the frame, we have a new resource that was introduced as well, which is unique to Nidus. This is called Mutation. Mutation is visible in the bottom right corner of your HUD. The gauge is made up of 5 different notches, and this gauge is filled whenever you hit enemies with your first ability or your fourth ability. Hitting up to 5 enemies fills up the gauge, and that's how you gain your first stack. Mutation gauge basically goes up to 100 stacks at max. What's important to note is that hitting enemies with your abilities will contribute towards your mutation. You don't actually have to kill them. These mutation stacks will be stored until you use them to cast your third or your fourth ability. The interesting thing about Nidus is that he has 2 abilities that cost energy, while 2 abilities cost mutation stacks. His third ability, Parasitic Link, costs 1 stack to activate instead of using energy, whereas Ravenous, the ultimate, requires 3 stacks in order to activate it. Another thing to point out is when Nidus was first introduced, nullifiers would not remove stacks. However, with some changes that came in, nullifier bubbles will now reduce your stacks by 1 mutation stack every 2 seconds you are inside the bubble itself. The drain rate will also ramp up the longer you stay inside the nullifier bubble range as well at the same time, so bear that in mind. Thankfully, it's not an instant cancel like, for example, when you get hit by a magnetic proc, which removes all of your power instantly. Mutation also kicks in your passive, which is called Undying. When you take lethal damage, at the cost of 15 stacks of mutation, you will be given 5 seconds of invulnerability and it will restore 50% of your HP. If you get killed and you do not have 15 stacks, it consumes all of your stacks without actually giving you the Undying passive. Nidus' first ability is called Virulence. The way this ability works is that whenever you activate your ability, it creates like a carpet of fungal growth that leads outward from your point of origin. Enemies that are hit by the ability are staggered and they take puncture damage as well. The unique feature of this ability is that enemies hit by Virulence contribute towards mutation stacks. Every 5 enemies hit by Virulence contribute to 1 stack. Power range mods affect Virulence's range, but it does not affect the width, and power strength mods increase the damage as well. Stacks also contribute towards damage of Virulence as well at the same time, so the more stacks you have, the more damage you will do. This is one of the few abilities that we have in Warframe that has proper scaling as well. The more stacks you have, the more damage you do, but if you lose those stacks, the damage is reduced. Building stacks also has a different sort of significance as well for the other abilities, but we'll talk about that in a minute. As an added feature, if you hold the ability button itself, you can choose in which direction you're going to cast your virulence as well. It's a novelty feature. It's not really necessary because you kind of just waste time. You just kind of gauge where you're aiming and just kind of go from there. Another feature of this ability is that enemies that are hit by virulence results in a 25% energy return per enemy that is hit. So in order to cast the ability for free, you need to hit at least 4 enemies. Any enemies hit beyond that will basically give you back energy. What this effectively does is it opens up more divergence in builds, so you can either go with high power strength and no efficiency, or you can go with high efficiency as well at the same time, depending on what sort of build you're running. This ability also has synergy with Parasitic Link. If you are connected to another teammate or an enemy via Parasitic Link, whenever you cast your virulence, you will create a second instance of the wave from the Parasitic Link at the point of where your crosshair is. The second wave will always converge with the first instance that is created from the Nidus itself. Maggots created by the ultimate ability Ravenous can be detonated using the first ability Virulence. Detonated maggots also contribute towards your stacks. While your Ravenous is active, if you hold the ability key for Virulence, maggots will be highlighted as well so you can see clearly where they are, so you can detonate them a bit easier. Because Virulence is creating a fungal growth on the ground, you cannot cast it in the air. It is also based on the same level that you cast the ability, so it cannot actually travel up and down different elevations. However, it does go up and down ramps and staircases. You cannot recast the ability until the fungal growth has reached its maximum length, or unless it's blocked by an obstruction. Because of this, natural talent is not important, it's just about placement. If you stand close to a wall, you can use the obstruction as a way to be able to recast your virulence very, very quickly and spam it to build up your stacks very, very fast. The second ability is called Larva. Think of this as an instanced version of Frozenballz Vortex. It grabs all enemies within the radius of the ability and within line of sight, and pulls them all into one neat little package for you to kill. These clumped up enemies caught by the larva are unable to move or attack, and this is a perfect setup for using your virulence for actually building up your stacks very, really quickly. The radius of the ability is determined by where the larva actually hits, not by the position of the Warframe. Duration obviously affects how long the enemies are held by larva as well. The best thing about this is it CCs both ground and flying units as well at the same time. Bear in mind, if there's an ancient nearby, it will absorb all CC effects, so it'll only pull the ancient but not pull all the other enemies that are, covered by the ancient's aura. One of the other good things about Larva is that it is a one-handed action, so that means you can cast it while you're in midair, while you're running, while you're sliding, while you're attacking, while you're even reloading your weapons. This ability is by far one of the best abilities when you combine it with Virulence, because you grab all the enemies into one neat little package, and then you can cast your Virulence to continually damage them and build your stacks very, very quickly and efficiently. Bear in mind, it only grabs enemies once when the larva is initially cast. It does not grab multiple enemies like how Vortex does. It also withers away once all the enemies that are caught by the initial larva are killed. Those are its two abilities that actually use energy. The next two abilities utilize stacks in order to actually function instead of energy. The third ability is called Parasitic Link. Think of this as a much better Trinity Link itself. The reason I say this is because it gives you both a 90% damage reduction with enough power strength, but it also gives you power strength bonus. If you link to an enemy, you get both the damage reduction and the power strength bonus, but if you link to a teammate, you both benefit from the power strength bonus as well. The ability is range bound and duration bound as well, so if you move far away from your linked target, your link will disconnect. One benefit this ability does have is that it does not require a line of sight connection. This ability is pretty powerful because when you link to an enemy, for example, the enemy becomes immune to all external sources of damage, so any damage that you take is transferred to the enemy itself. This includes status effects, knockdown effects, and all that kind of stuff. So whereas when you get knocked down by a bombard which is nearby, for example, the knockdown effect will not affect your Warframe, but it'll actually be transferred over to the enemy that you are linked towards. The bonus that you get from using Parasitic Link is multiplicative. While you only need 80% more power strength on top of your base to get 90% damage reduction, any more power strength added on increases the power strength bonus that you get and your teammate gets as well at the same time when you link to a teammate. The idea for this is pretty simple. You cast your first ability, you build a stack or two, you cast your third ability, and you always kind of remain in close proximity to your target that you're linked to, so you can get your power strength bonus and your damage reduction as well as at the same time. 90% damage reduction plus power strength bonus means you're going to be doing a lot of damage while being extremely tanky at the same time. Coupled with the fact that Nidus has inbuilt inbuilt health regen, the survivability increases exponentially. As mentioned previously, if you were to cast Virulence while you are linked to an enemy or a teammate, a second instance of that Virulence will also be created, converging over to where your reticle is aimed at. What this basically means is you've got 2 waves for the price of 1, doing double hits, which means you get 2 stacks if you hit 5 enemies. Another thing to point out as well is the power strength bonus is based on the person who actually casts the ability. So if you cast the ability with a high power strength, you will be the one which will provide the power strength bonus to both you and the linked target as well. The last ability is called Ravenous. The most important aspect of this ability is the fact that it creates an AoE healing area around, which is not affected by power range mods. It has a straight 8-meter radius. It also creates spawning grounds for maggots as well at the same time. These maggots will go out and seek enemies and bite them or latch onto them. You can detonate these maggots using your virulence, and when these maggots are detonated, they actually contribute to your mutation stacks as well at the same time. Power strength mods increases the health regen per second. The duration of the field is affected by power duration mods as well. Your health regen works very well for healing teammates. It works well for healing companions, specters, rescue hostages, syndicate operatives, sortie defense operatives, and even invasion allied faction units as well at the same time. It does not heal the defense pod now, however, that's been fixed. The idea is to utilize the maggots when they latch onto enemies and then detonate them using virulence. What this does is it directly contributes to your stacks and helps you build up your stacks very, very quickly. And when you cast your Ravenous, or if you were to take fatal damage, by blowing up the maggots, you can build up your stacks pretty quickly as well and get up to that 100 stack limit as well very, very quickly, allowing you to pump out that damage, increase your survivability as well at the same time. Having said that, I would not completely rule out the damage potential of the maggots as well, because the power strength bonuses, the stack bonuses, the mutation bonuses all add up to the explosion damage of your maggots. Because of your Warframe's power strength is taken into account when you cast Ravenous, which also determines the damage of your maggots when they explode, you ideally want to be linked up to an enemy or to a friendly unit when you cast your Ravenous so that the explosion damage is increased even further. Recasting Ravenous does not create multiple instances of Ravenous. It'll basically remove the previous one and create a new one in your new area where you're standing. If you're standing in the same place as where the previous one was, it'll refresh the duration of the current Ravenous that is cast. The maggot's lifespan is tied to the ability itself. When a maggot is killed or it detonates, new maggots will spawn from the nesting grounds inside the Ravenous ability itself, and they will seek out enemies as well to continually attack them, to latch onto them, to bite them, and all that kind of shit. Normally when it comes to builds, I usually just capitalize and talk about specific abilities and how you can min-max those, because those tend to be the abilities that do well, that scale well, and the ones which you should be focusing on. With the way Nidus is, every single ability complements each other and they actually contribute towards making him extremely tanky, increases damage potential and survivability at the same time, which is why it was important to explain how every single ability actually functions. This is actually the first frame which has all 4 abilities that synergize with each other, help scale up and do a lot of damage as well at the same time. Having said that, let's talk about the builds itself. The first build revolves around pure tankiness and survivability while being able to dish out a lot of damage as well, and it's a bit of a balanced build as opposed to the second build, which is pure CC. The concept behind the first build is high power strength for maximum damage potential, vitality and steel fiber for survivability as well at the same time, and then having enough duration and enough power pool available as well to spam your abilities and have a decent duration on your abilities as well so they last long enough. Because of this particular reason, we use a combination of vitality and steel fiber together to give you, a high health pool and high armor as well. Because I'm using steel fiber and I'm also using arcane guardian, I don't use rage. The reason for that is simple. Because there's so much damage mitigation, I'm not actually fully utilizing rage for, generating energy, which is why I rely mostly on getting energy back via doing damage via, the first ability itself. As mentioned previously, using less efficiency mods means the power return is higher as well when you use mods like Blind Rage. For that particular reason, I use Transient Fortitude and a rank 7 Blind Rage. The reason why I use a rank 7 Blind Rage over a max rank is that when you use a max rank Blind Rage, if you are not hitting 5+ enemies every single time, you will be wasting power. By using a rank 7 Blind Rage, you make a compromise in terms of the amount of damage you do and still have enough energy left over in case you hit only 2 or 3 enemies as opposed to hitting 4 every single time. To counteract the Blind Rage, there is a streamline there in that build as well, so that way you have some sort of efficiency, and Prime Flow means you've got a big enough power pool. Prime Continuity increases your duration of all of your abilities, and Stretch and Cutting Drift are used there to increase the range of your abilities as well at the same time. Corrosive Projection is the aura of choice. For this particular build, I use Arcane Grace on the helmet and Arcane Guardian for the Siandana itself. Arcane Grace is fantastic. It stacks with the health regen that Nidus already has, so it makes him even more survivable and much more tankier as well at the same time. Arcane Guardian increases his armor. Because of this, it makes Nidus even more tankier. Due to having abilities that allow you to have more power return and actually get more power back as opposed to how much you expend, you don't actually have to use Arcane Energize on this particular frame, which is fantastic. Always make sure you use your second ability to group up a bunch of enemies and then use your Virulence to hit them. This will mean an efficient use of your ability, building stacks faster as well, and doing a lot of damage as well at the same time. You want to be making sure that your 3 and 4 have 100% uptime. Remember, all the damage mitigation that you have, all the damage which is transferred to your linked enemy, all of that damage is only applied when the ability ends, so the enemy will not die until the ability ends, which means you can take a shit ton of punishment and it'll be all diverted and transferred to your linked enemy, and once the link ends, that's when they will take all of that damage all together at once and it will kill them. Nidus excels into late game missions, and because of his skill set, he works very, very well if you're trying to hold down the fort and, pump out that damage at the same time. Bear in mind, there are many people who actually like using Rage as opposed to using Streamline, and that is a viable alternative if that fits into your playstyle. I like having that safety net of a little bit of efficiency to counteract the Blind Rage and that Prime Flow for a bigger energy pool so I can spam the ability a bit more, so you can pick and choose according to your own playstyle. The second ability, and as far as I'm concerned, the most powerful ability that Nidus has, is a pure CC build. The concept for this build is pretty simple. Maximum efficiency, maximum range, spam your 2, group up enemies, and kill them by the dozen. Despite the fact that Larva only grabs enemies initially and it doesn't grab more enemies, it's still a very powerful ability. It grabs enemies from 30 meters away, and as we know, CC is king in Warframe. Because of this particular reason, you utilize Stretch, Overextended, and Cunning Drift to give you maximum range. Fleeting Expertise and Streamline gives you maximum efficiency so you can spam your Larva over and over and over. Prime Flow gives you that bigger energy pool as well so you can spam the ability as well. Vitality gives you that extra HP so it gives you more survivability as well at the same time, because you would still need some sort of survivability in general. Because of the type of build this is, it's not a bad idea to make use of Handspring in this particular build, especially if you're going to be fighting against enemies that love knocking you down and spamming knockdown abilities and such like that. The last mod slot is kind of free. You can put whatever you want in there. I like using Firewalker just so that way I've got the freedom to move around very, very quickly across the entire map. I would go so far to say that you don't actually need power strength on this particular build, because with just the base amount of power strength, you can still kill enemies pretty well. And because your damage output with Virulence is so low, you can actually build your stacks very quick. When it comes to auras, you use Corrosive Projection. When it comes to arcanes, I utilize Arcane Grace on the helmet as usual, like I said. And based on the focus school, I use either Arcane Energize if I'm using Naramon or any other school. And if I'm using Zenuric, I use Arcane Guardian. And that's pretty much it, really. The entire purpose of these 2 builds is, the first one is massive survivability, massive damage output, and crowd control capabilities as well. And the second build is pure crowd control. Thank you very much for watching. As always, 100% appreciate it. And again, for the people who joined me on my trip to becoming a Twitch partnered streamer as well, thank you very much for the support, the unending support. It's been absolutely insane. Thank you very much, guys. If you like what you saw, make sure you hit a like, a follow, and a subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.